Hi, Lucas Walker here, the small business consultant who gets big results. Today I'm going to talk about what it takes to be an entrepreneur. As things keep changing in the world, a lot of people are trying to make the decision of should I leave the quote safety of a 9 to 5 jobby job and move off onto my own? Should I create a side hustle? Should I try to take that path? There are a lot of myths, there's a lot of fear around that, and so the goal of this series is to kind of break down some of these various elements. The first thing I want to cover before I get into my list of key elements of entrepreneurship is that if you're thinking about entrepreneurship as a get-rich-quick scheme, do not start entrepreneurship. That is probably the worst reason to ever try. It is not a shortcut. It is a long cut. It's proven to work, but it is a long cut. You're going to work way harder for way less money being an entrepreneur than you are within some other organization. Just period, the end. We'll talk more about that why later, but if that is your goal, I would suggest you just keep trying to hop up the corporate ladder in different positions. That's where you're going to get the best time for money return. Now, if you'd like to be more in control of your destiny, if you would like to have some feeling of creativity that you're making something from scratch, that you're building something, then entrepreneurship is probably a good idea for you. So I have a list put together here of some of the things that are non-negotiables. Number one is you have to be a hard worker. I'll talk more about this in detail in another video, but the basic concept is when you're an employee somewhere, you are paid for all of the work that you do. When you start your own business, there are billable hours and unbillable hours. So if you think about it as like a power meter, certain work you do for a client you actually get paid for. That ends up being a very small sliver when you first start. You might have to go to hours and hours of networking events, coffee meetings, appointments, cold calls, working on a website where you're actually paid absolutely nothing just to get your first client who maybe gives you $50, $100, $200. So your unbillable hours to billable hours is way out of whack. As you get better at business, this can improve, but it takes a long time to start to fix that. That means that even though maybe your current employer is paying you $30 an hour for a certain type of labor and you are charging the customer $100 an hour, that even though, yes, when you have your own business, if you charge even 80, you're making way more than you used to make before, it might have taken you 10 hours to sell that 1 hour of work. So actually ended up making like $8 an hour, not the 80 that you thought you would be making. So being a hard worker is non-negotiable. If your work is only motivated by money, you will burn out, you will quit. So being a hard worker is number one. Number two is you have to have a focus on quality. The reason being is if you're just trying to get into the scene to make money or to do something easy, you have no competitive edge. The main way you can compete is by creating a better quality outcome or value than anybody else. That means that you have to be constantly learning. It helps to be at top of your field when you first start. You have to be constantly learning and adapting and focusing on that quality. The instant that you abandon quality for scalability, so when you stop worrying about the quality of each interaction, just focus on getting big, is whenever you just kind of blend into the marketplace. If you're focused on quality, then the actual value you're giving people is much higher than what they're paying for, and that difference is what allows them to refer other people to you, to be repeat users of your product and come around again and again. Whenever you stop focusing on quality, now they're paying for a quality of a good, and they're getting pretty much that same or lesser, so the chances of them looping back around again are really small. That means that you might sell them one time on what you have, but they won't become a repeat customer or a referral customer. So quality is a non-negotiable. If you're trying to cut corners or that is your typical MO, this is not for you. So being a hard worker is one, focusing on quality is number two, adaptability and patience is number three. So a lot of people think that they can sit in their armchair and think a really smart thought about business. They can sit there and have this business idea and that it's just going to happen the way they envisioned it. They think everyone that went on Shark Tank just sat down with a napkin, sketched out an idea, and they go on there and they get millions of dollars. A truly successful business typically begins with a fearlessness in approaching something that we know is not a finished product. It's kind of heading down a path. And then now this patience of it's going to take us a long time to get there, but we're noticing what are the deviations we have to make in that path. Where should we adapt? So we kind of head in one direction, new information comes to light, we shift a little bit, we shift a little bit. Think of it like a river running through the countryside or roots growing underground. They're going to grow until they hit a rock and they're going to adjust and move. That's the way of nature, that's the way of life. Very rarely is there a straight line, non-stop direction forward. And in business, I would say I have seen 0 times someone sit down, think of a plan and then execute it and it all goes according to plan. That just doesn't happen. Instead, we head in a direction we have to adapt. So you have to be a hard worker, focus on quality, have patience and adaptability so that you're ready to adjust to keep tuning things in. The other really big important part is organization. So sometimes entrepreneurs are so much into the element of hard work that they don't mind to grind and roll their sleeves up, but they forget that you have to have some structure and some organization. I talked a little bit about billable and unbillable hours later. This is really important because if you're not organized, your unbillable hours can expand and expand, which means that your capacity in your week, if you want to work, let's say 60 or 70 hours in a week, if 30 of those are used for unbillable hours, it only leaves you 30 or 40 to actually bill. If you can cut your unbillable time down by being more organized, it can actually increase your billable time, or it can just have you working a 40-hour week still billing for 30 hours. So organization is key. How to organize becomes a skill you learn over time. Most of these that I've gone over so far are things that maybe you have a personality trait that would allow for that, but you're not going to know exactly how to do it until you're heading down the path of entrepreneurship. Another important part of the organization is doing some basic math before you dive all the way into a business. I have other content on this that helps you break down the math of your business, but you don't have to work really hard for 4 years to find out your idea doesn't work. You can actually do it on pen and paper, algebra, say, what do I plan on charging for my product? What are my expected business expenses? How much do I have to take home? Based on those facts, how many of my product do I have to sell per month to pay my bills? And then you can look at that number and say, is that reasonable or not reasonable? If it's not, what are the variables I can change? Maybe I don't need a giant warehouse. Maybe I can work out of my own house. Maybe my price point has to be much higher, which means my value has to be much higher. All those pieces can be moved around, but as you're in the business doing and working and grinding away, it's really hard to make those changes. So it's much easier if you kind of sit down up front and have a general map that you know you're going to adjust over time as you begin. So hard worker is non-negotiable. That patience and adaptability is non-negotiable. Quality is non-negotiable. A level of organization is non-negotiable. One of the final major things is self-care. So in my experience, the number one reason a business fails is because the owner gets too tired and too burnt out. As long as you still have energy, you can adapt, you can change, you can find a way, you can make it happen, you can grind and do it. Once you're exhausted, too exhausted to try new things, your business is going to fail for sure. So that self-care piece is really important. So it's kind of a balance early on. There's a stage early where you're pretty much just drowning and you have to get your head above water, making the cash flow to pay your bills. That's kind of grind your face off time. Once you hit that level though, it's important to find ways to scale back the needs of the business so that your personal needs are met more and more, and then continue looking for ways to expand the business while maintaining that protection around yourself so you can keep on driving the business forward. So this is just a little bit of an introduction to some of the core concepts around starting your own business. If you have any other questions, hit me up in the comments. I'll put out some more video content over time to dive deeper into these ideas.